This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Artery Inc. Did you know that March is National Kidney Month? Well, you might have if you went over to www.arteryinc.com, that's ink spelled I-N-K, and checked out, for instance, their apparel, their stickers, and even their kidney art-themed greeting cards. You're not going to find a more unique stock of items, especially for the anatomy enthusiasts in your life. Use PHPod at checkout to receive 10% off all orders over $35 to save some money and show your appreciation for our show. And note that discount does not apply to the subscription boxes. With that, let's get to the show. This podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice. It exists only to entertain. In rural New England in the 1600s, in a small village house, a young child is ill, and the parents have called for a doctor. Well, what seems to be the trouble?
Oh, it's little Elizabeth. It's burned up with a fever, pal.
Well, yeah, her and half the village. Look, I don't mean to be rude, but why did you think to call? I mean, it's not like this is unusual.
Well, she's also having visions of flying monkeys and all manner of beasts in her room, pal.
Okay. That is a bit unusual. Hey, it's really quite obvious to me what's happening to her. At least someone with my advanced training and knowledge. It's pretty obvious.
I couldn't help it over here, Doctor. Is it possible it might be related to something she ate? The pastor's girls had something similar. It stands to reason it might be related.
What's that? No, it's obviously a silly thought. What of the other children?
I've been keeping them away from her.
So she doesn't poison their souls with her madness?
No. That's a strange thing to say. I was just thinking that, so often people get sick when others are sick, so maybe somehow they could, catch it.
Yeah, I just read a paper from Italy from Girolamo Foscaro. They mentioned the concept of fomes. Foams in Latin are an infectious agent, if you will. They might jump from one person to another.
You are reading? You guys are farmers. Why would you do that?
Well, the winters are long.
But we never would think of challenging your knowledge, Doctor. What do you think's wrong?
Well, it's obvious. She's a witch.
What? I mean, she seems ill. I'm not sure how that works.
She is seeing visions from the devil, obviously. There's no other scientifically possible explanation for this illness. She's young and impressionable, and she's a girl. Just the kind that Satan likes.
Well, that doesn't seem very medical.
How many Italian medical papers about satanic visions did you read last winter?
Well, actually...
Okay. Well, is there a test or something we can use to, be more scientific?
Well, we could try an exorcism, but the pastor is quite busy. In the meantime, obviously we'll have to see if she floats. I mean, if she sinks, she's not a witch. If she floats, she is.
Yeah, I don't think that's right. I mean, if she sinks, isn't that dangerous for her?
Did you go to Hoppet?
I mean, no, but...
Then it's settled. Bring her to the river tomorrow. We'll do the test.
Yep. We'll definitely be there tomorrow for the test where we hope our daughter drowns to prove she's not a witch. Is this century over yet? Anyway, thanks for your help. Can I see you out now? You must be quite busy. So many people to see. Here's your payment in grain. These clumpy purple things, just peel them off. I'm sure they're fine. It was so wet last winter.
Oh, it's good grain this year. I love grain sandwiches.
So, are we going to...
No, we're not going.
Yeah, sorry.
Throughout history, it's just facts and there might believe. You gotta listen, you don't have to read. For historians.
Welcome, everyone. This is Poor Historians, a podcast delving into the archives of medical history. As three emergency physicians, we will explore the unusual ailments, treatments, physicians, and all related material having to do with the healing arts. I'm Max, and I'm joined here by my good friends and colleagues, Aaron and Mike. Gentlemen, hold on a second, because I'm going to need a minute to compose mycelium.
Amanita.
Amanita.
It's two fungus-related puns in one sentence. My writing career just peaked. And that's the end of our podcast.
Yes,
Nah,
thank
it's
you.
great. Yeah, we're good. That's
All right.
I'm definitely
can't
glad
get
it's
better
over.
than that.
All right. Well, let's we got a shout out here? Looks like we got a shout out. Whose shout out is this?
Yeah. One of our listeners, Genevieve, used our Phineas Gage podcast info to explain the Phineas Gage story in French to her Swiss host father.
Ooh.
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense.
Which
So
part?
The Swiss, I guess in Europe you speak many languages.
Yeah, so Switzerland, there's a French-speaking part, a German-speaking part, and an Italian-speaking
Oh,
part.
interesting. I didn't know that.
It
Yeah.
kind of borders all those countries.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I guess Swiss French is a little different than French French.
What you're saying is they used their podcast as a framework
that was
to
her-
demonstrate their
That was
knowledge
her
of
source, and she
Oh.
translated it. So I was like, oh,
That's frightening.
we're multilingual. Yeah.
That's definitely got to be a first for us.
Yeah.
Oh, well, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Well, I think it's about as good of a time as any to try out our new little segment here. This is Mike's mailbag, and we had asked on the last show, we're going to try this out, have you guys send us a question, a medical history question, and see if Mike just kind of happens to know it off the top of his head. Basically, we're going to test the depths of his knowledge of all things medical history. So he does not know this question. He doesn't know what's about to be asked, and he has to provide the best possible answer if he feels he is up to the task. How do you feel about that?
I feel up to the task. Yep, I'm ready.
He is up to the task. So this question, the first question, comes from one of our fans and longtime listener, it would seem, named Dan. And Dan asked this. Oh, actually, I'm going to preface this too. So the cool thing about this submission is that Dan actually sent in the question and had a source for it, which I think kind of changes the idea of this little segment for the better. So we're going to learn some interesting tidbit of medical history, assuming Mike knows it. And if Mike doesn't know it, then I'll tell you what what the story is. So Dan's question was, what medication used to treat asthma back in the early 20th century, 1911 specifically, if that helps you, Mike, resulted in the death of an Arizona woman named Ms. Pearson?
Ms. Pearson. This is an interesting case from the turn of the century. Ms. Pearson. Now, Ms. Pearson had an issue with her cardiac conduction system. So the medicine was theophylline, it's analogous to caffeine. And if you use it in excess, meds like albuterol will do this as well. Like they'll make your heart rate go up. And so she actually had this thing called prolonged QTC, which is it's a EKG finding, but essentially your heart depolarizes really quickly or too quickly. And you could have an atrial beat that starts on top of a ventricular beat, and it can trigger this thing called torsade de pointe, which is just a really disorganized heart rhythm that almost always is fatal if left untreated. So she inadvertently overdosed herself on theophylline and died of torsade de pointe.
So that was a way better answer than I got to be honest. That was a very good take. You're completely wrong.
Oh, no, I don't think that I am. I'm pretty sure that I'm not.
Well,
that was pretty awesome. You had me, man.
No,
I
think
Mike
it's
knows the
actually
answer.
probably the best on the spot guess, I would say. So he sent in the Arizona newspaper article from the time that basically said what happened. And Ms. Pearson died from overdose of chloroform. Because at the time, and you were right, so theophylline was an early treatment, but it did not happen until a little bit later in the 20th century. So that wasn't a mainstay, and people would use chloroform among a bunch of other stuff, which I'll talk about real quick, but to treat asthma because it made them feel better. But if you have too much
they just got a
chloroform by
little
yourself,
sedated.
pretty much. So it was among
better.
things.
Oh my God.
So I wanted to look up and make sure that was really a thing, or it wasn't like this lady was abusing chloroform and it just so happened she had asthma. And so I looked up, there was actually a cool article in the New England Journal from about 10 years ago that was like, a patient seeks asthma advice in 1828, 1928, and 2012, and kind of compared the things. But the coolest thing I found in that little article was that people used to recommend, at about the time that this happened, recommendation was to smoke the leaf of the Datura stramonium plant. It's known as the thorn apple plant. And at first I was like, okay, that's obviously there was a time where cigarettes were recommended for asthma and respiratory treatment, which is insane.
Mhm.
But this was even before that. And I kind of was like, oh, okay, kind of rolling my eyes. And then, but in this article, the New England Journal, they had actually reported that apparently that plant happens to have properties very similar to a medication called ipratropium, which is
Yeah.
used very much in asthma treatment today. So that was probably the best they could do. It probably didn't work that great, but chloroform was used by a lot of folks to treat asthma as well, because it just, you'd have an asthma attack and you huff a bunch of chloroform and who cared anymore? There you go. But theophylline,
They look
Mike,
better.
I was right.
that was a hell of a good guess. Hell
Did you
of a
like
good
that?
guess.
Yeah,
That
it was a little
was-
confabulation. I started getting nervous then while I was talking. You could probably
No,
No, no, it was
actually,
good.
I was like,
you had-
okay, wait.
it's like,
I
wow.
thought you were going to do something completely off left field, but there you go.
You must have done well on rounds, man.
I
Oh,
did. I
God.
told you, I would come in late and be like, I'm just going to make this shit up because I don't know because I did not prepare.
But then,
Fake it till you make it.
you finish it, and the attending's like, everyone should be more like Mike.
Yes.
Oh, God. Well,
No.
many thanks for the question, Dan. And if you'd like to test the expanses of Mike's medical history knowledge and share a cool factoid with us in the similar format, go ahead and email us at poorhistorianspod@gmail.com or go to our website, www.poorhistorianspod.com, where we have a contact us form you could use. So with that, let's move on to our show. What are we talking about, Aaron?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about fungus. I started thinking about this topic because of that new HBO show, The Last of Us. Have you guys watched that at all? Or it's based on a video game. And either of you played the video game?
Mm-mm. I watched one episode.
Oh, did you like
It
it?
was good. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
good. Well,
Yeah.
because I was like, well, this is just The Walking Dead. And my son was like, no. You only see zombies like 3 times or 5 times in the whole show. It's
It's a good show. I mean,
interpersonal
so
thing.
well, we already told you what's some of the things that happen, but a little spoiler warning: if you haven't watched the show at all, I think most of what I'm going to say is already on the internet. So I don't know, but yeah, and we're not going to talk about the show that much. But it's a show and a video game where fungus mutates and then it takes over the entire species and turns everybody into zombies. The creators don't want them to be called zombies, but yeah.
This game escaped me because it came out on PlayStation alone back in medical school when I didn't have any video games because I gave them all away because otherwise I probably wouldn't have succeeded at medical school with video games in my orbit.
Yeah.
So this is all new to me. I haven't seen the show yet.
I only play games on my phone, so that's yeah.
So you're
Candy
a zombie.
Crush,
You're one
HBO
of those
specials
zombies
coming.
now.
Yeah, I'm a zombie now. Yep. So, but it is based, like, the fungus they used is real. This cordyceps fungus is a real. Actually, cordyceps is a genus that these.
So it's really smart.
Yeah, it's genius fungus. They will invade hosts. Usually this happens in rainforests with ants, and it like grows inside the ant and kills them. But then as it does that, it takes over the body of the insect and makes it do what it wants. So it's like it really is like a legitimate zombie.
I remember seeing this stuff. Yeah, they're like they make the ants climb up higher, like before they die, so that when the mushroom sprouts out of the ant's face, it basically will shoot the spores further.
Yeah.
Is that am I remembering that correctly?
No, that's correct. And like the other ants know this is a problem, so like they'll take the infected ant far away and try to kill it and stuff if they notice, but they often don't. It's very interesting. But in the show, there's that, which is real, and then it gets into flour and then goes all over the world. So. Which is, something also that happens. So there's some legitimate basis to it. And then the rest of it is really just an apocalypse show. But it made me think about fungus, which is kind of fun. So I did put in the show notes, there's a cool link to a BBC article that has David Attenborough narrating this fungus itself, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I could listen to him read a menu.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's weird. Fungi are quite mysterious, even though they found the ants and stuff. It's not entirely clear how they do this. Like, I didn't find an article that explained how they do it, because it like surrounds the brain, but it doesn't actually grow into it. And then it's just,
what it basically all creatures up in their head have like a little control panel with a couple levers and buttons, and so the fungus just uses those to basically drive.
Just displaces the gnome that sits in the base of your brain.
No.
You didn't like
Because the
that?
fungi, they have tendrils, but they don't They don't have hands. They can't pull levers.
Do you mean they have hyphae?
It's the tendrils.
Hyphae?
Well, but nobody calls them hyphae. I guess Max does.
Mycologists do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right, people that
that's
study
true.
me do.
So,
No, absolutely not. I'm
you know,
going to cut that out of spite.
we see more fungal illness in the emergency room than we sort of acknowledge. But most of it's not very fun to talk about on a podcast because it's like yeast infections and infections in immunocompromised patients and so on. And I don't know, I just didn't find a bunch. But
That's fair.
Emergency room docs do have sort of usually exposure to pretty significant toxicities from specific fungi. And those are very rare. You know, I don't know if I've even seen most of the ones that I studied, but they're scary, right?
I think I saw one in residency that Poison Control had sent in.
Yeah. So some of the ones I think of, like mucormycosis, is a fungal infection in diabetics
I've seen that once, actually, now that you mention it. I saw it once. It was, go ahead.
It's crazy. So the case is usually a patient with diabetes who's very sick. And if you don't do a mouth exam, you miss the fact that they have a little fungal sinus infection. So they'll actually get a scab in the top of their mouth. Sometimes you can see it in the nose too, but it grows in the sinuses and there's like nothing you can do. And it just like goes all over inside the
literally
mouth.
Starts
nothing you
eating
can
away
do.
skull. It's pretty bad. And it's at least, it's like, it doesn't it leave like it's like a blackened lesion on the mouth or like nose or whatnot. And it's pretty, it's
like
pretty
the
gnarly.
hallmark lesion. That one's scary. Amanita phalloides, which the phal part is for phallus. So then they named it. It's like Death Angel penis is how it, it's great. That's
Not
an
mad about that.
actual mushroom that grows in the wild that will kill a person very quickly. And that mushroom is implicated in the deaths of Roman Emperor Claudius and the Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV historically. So, and it looks kind of like some of these edible mushrooms. So,
I mean, any mushroom could be edible, just it's whether you should or not.
Yeah. So that whole group, those toxins in those mushrooms halt protein synthesis, so everything in your body sort of grinds to a halt and then you die. There's a lot of other toxic mushrooms, which is why I will never ever go gather mushrooms in the forest. I know people like to do this.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
don't.
risk though, right? Yeah.
That must be part of it, but like also I don't like to eat mushrooms anyway. And I know people will probably say that I'm missing out on a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm okay with that.
But I don't think
Aaron.
with this.
Yeah.
You're
like
missing out on a bunch of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but no, with this. Okay, so you go into a ditch, you find a bunch of mushrooms that you think are safe to
Right.
eat. And even if they're not like, they're going to kill you toxic, you're going to have diarrhea for like 2 or 3 days. Like, where's the excitement in that?
Much more common that LBMs are little brown mushrooms that you find in the yard.
Those liquid
often
bowel
will
movements.
Cause, that's what it's for.
Yeah,
Yeah,
never.
will usually cause severe GI illness. And then the morels, which everyone says, oh, those are really cool. Yeah, there's false ones that look like that, but they actually are very toxic. So and just mess you up. So I just don't see that I don't know. Do you guys have favorites that you like or favorite cases?
I mean, there's a farmer's market like near my house that we always go to, and I like those mushrooms that they sell. Always interesting ones, but they also grow them. So I know that they didn't grab them in the wild and maybe make a mistake in identifying it. Right. And I never understood because of the danger of foraging incorrectly can be so high. I just, I prefer to buy mushrooms that are non-ditch mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. But no, I mean, many mushrooms, I'm like the vegetarian on the show here. So like eat a lot of mushrooms, and many of them are really good, but just don't get mushrooms you find behind your house. There's an obvious void here where you could say like your favorite mushrooms are the ones you can buy for recreational purposes.
Ooh, I was going to say psilocybin.
That's true. Psilocybin, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't even talk about.
I was going to say I've definitely taken care of patients on that.
Yeah, I'm boring, man. Didn't even occur to me.
So go to I think Ann Arbor. You can buy them off the shelf, man.
No,
Off
really?
the shelf.
Yep, Ann Arbor, Michigan. I think.
Why?
I don't know. Why not?
Like, why would you, or why?
No,
do
why
they allow
can
it?
you? Yeah.
There's probably some research. at the
They
research.
legalized recreational mushrooms.
Hmm.
I wouldn't. I don't trust my brain on hallucinogen.
Yeah, I'd have to try it in a safe setting. Anyway, so but there are
podcast. We could do a live stream.
but wait, I feel like the audio medium is not great for.
that'd be video. You'd have
You
to
just
do
say
video.
stupid stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
Maybe.
our true fans would want.
Do you enjoy having a license?
Oh, geez. Yeah, we'd have to clarify where it is, right?
That's right.
I mean, if you
It's in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where it is legal to
Bringing you the show
consume.
from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
probably just be a lot of staring and drooling. And staring at
How's that different than our usual recording?
yeah, not very. Anyway, so the first I'm going to talk about two interesting historical topics. Anyway, whatever. That was a terrible introduction.
You don't
We
think
move
they're
on.
topics?
It's very, very specific, Aaron.
They're
Thank
not
you so much.
historical. Which word
for
are you
clarifying.
taking issue with?
All of them.
it was just artless. Anyway, even one damn fungus can cause a lot of trouble. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Claviceps purpura, which is a great name. It is kind of purple, but I don't think that's what they were getting at. Purpura, of course, that medical term for a rash, turns all purple and raised and full blood blisters.
So
Essentially,
purpura means purpley.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Purpley
so.
rash. That's how.
Yeah, I didn't take Latin, but so there is some suspicion, or there is a theory about this fungus and the Salem witch trials, which we're going to talk about. So, witch trials, sadly, we talk about Salem a lot. They actually were a thing for hundreds of years in Europe, and they just decided to have trials to kill witches. And for thousands of people ended up being executed in these, mostly women, because Christianity taught that the devil would give people powers in exchange for allegiance, and they used that to kind of just go crazy frequently. It happened here in colonial Massachusetts from about 1692 until 1693. And during that time, they had about 200 total trials for suspected witchcraft. And the final tally, 19 hangings, 14 women and 5 men. Fun fact about the Salem witch trials.
Oh, here.
Wait, what
Fun
about the
facts.
drownings? What about the drownings? Did that they
That
count?
was in Monty Python. I didn't
didn't
see that they talked about it in the actual
I
Salem
feel
witch
like I
trials.
did learn about that being a thing, but
Yeah, I don't know if it happened in Salem, right? So
Okay,
Monty Python's
okay.
not from the U.S., so maybe they just,
Okay.
but there were enough witch trials. They probably did it at some point.
sure.
It's the only time in American history that somebody was executed by something called pressing, which is a nice name for slowly squishing somebody. So they like tie all your extremities and then they add weight to your torso until you die.
This was your fun fact.
Couldn't
Yeah,
they be
it's just a fun fact.
depressed?
Well, if you took the stuff off, they would be okay if they didn't die. But
Like Aaron's just gonna move past your joke, Mike.
Yeah.
He's not here for that.
Actually, when you're depressed, it feels like there's a lot of weight, not pressing. They should have called it depression.
oh my gosh, yeah, that's pretty
More
good.
Aaron fun facts.
Just
Depression
took all the
and
fun out of the
execution.
facts. Yeah.
But originally, if you
Claviceps purpura.
we're going off the rails. Yeah, it used to be if you didn't admit guilt, then your family could still have your stuff when you died. And so pressing came it was like, tell us what you did or we'll add more stones. It's terrible. Anyway, so that was the kind of that's the witch trials. They're great. Yeah. Anyway.
Don't worry, we know you don't think they're great.
That's
Yeah.
one thing. There's one reason why I have an unhealthy fear of New England in
I
that
know.
area of the country. It's like,
No, it's fair.
especially
It's
in
fair.
out like around fall. I've never been there for a reason because of
I mean,
those
New
damn
England
witch
in the fall
trials.
is beautiful. So
Is it though?
but
Is it
Do you
though?
think that you're going to be accused of being a witch?
I could.
No.
Got unusual tendencies.
You got
I
hyphae.
have, what? I have hyphae.
so historians have have thought of this period of time as unusual. It's probably not that unusual, but they were like, wow, everybody went crazy. Why did that happen? And so there's a famous article I believe in the 70s that said one of the possible culprits is a fungus called Claviceps purpura, which grows on spoiled rye, the best wheat, and contains ergot alkaloid toxins that activate the nervous system and constrict blood vessels. So the two main things. So it causes something called ergotism, which is it comes in two forms. Actually, this happened frequently throughout history as well. One of them, which is more convulsive, and one which is gangrenous. So you either have fits and see stuff, or your limbs fall off. You
Those are
choose.
really bad forms and choices.
Yeah, they're both bad. So it does activate sort of the same part of your brain that a lot of our antidepressants use to their advantage, actually. So you get this flood of chemicals in the brain, and you get hallucinations and tremors and fever, which we would see as serotonin syndrome presently. And so the theory is maybe because people are acting all crazy and tremulous and such, and their pupils are weird and such, everyone's like, oh, maybe they're witches.
And they're just eating this spoiled grain, and they have no idea.
Right. So it's there is weather data from, it was 1976 when this paper came out. The winter before the witch trials was very wet, so it's likely that there was a fair amount of spoilage of the rye. And the symptoms started in the preacher's family, which is great. Of course, the preacher's kids were the ones accused of being witches. I mean, I feel like, and was likely paid in grain at the time, so they probably just got, they got exposed first.
Can I pay my student loans in grain?
Yeah, I'm sure you can. Just go to the big building where they keep the loans and give them the grain in a bag.
It's called a silo, Aaron. Oh, where they keep the grain or the loans? Oh,
the loans.
Oh, I don't know where they keep the loans.
Oh, yeah. All in one building.
I don't know if they keep the grains in the silo either. I don't know.
Yeah,
they put something in there. Corn.
A more fun fact than this is that LSD was actually synthesized from ergot, which is one of the toxins. So
that is a better fun fact.
That's a better fun fact. Nobody.
These people probably didn't have headaches, and honestly, like if they were being hanged, they're hallucinating their butts off. So I mean, they probably don't even know.
It just depends when they come down, though. I mean,
yeah,
they're not
right. Like when they come down,
it's probably the worst time because they're like, wait, where am I?
Yeah.
I mean, I think every ER doc who's been out there for any amount of time has taken care of their fair share of LSD-addled people who are nowhere near Earth at the time that you see them, but after about 6 to 12 hours, depending on the dose, they typically are touching down once again and very surprised to see you.
Yeah. They're like, what happened? So this theory was, a lot of people pick this up. It is all over the internet. Kind of interesting phenomenon whereby people ascribe medical diagnoses to prior historical phenomena. And usually, it's sort of a questionable retrospective bias.
Is that what we're doing, though?
Well, yes, we're talking about the theory. Just give me a minute. I'll get there. Most people think that this likely was a different, still medical cause, which was mass hysteria. That's the old word for it. It's now called mass psychogenic illness, where a distinct group of people have either symptoms of anxiety or they can have abnormal motor movements that don't have a discernible cause. I know that this is a little bit of an interesting territory here, right? So, because you don't want to say, oh, it's all in your head, but sometimes it actually seems like it might be, because typically these mass hysteria cases, mass psychogenic illness cases,
why are we avoiding the hysteria word?
Because it's more judgy. No, it's more judgy. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Also, the roots of, yeah. So
I mean, that was the whole thing. They used to tie. So hystera basically is a root word for uterus, and so it's kind of a horrifically misogynistic way to say that anytime people are acting abnormally, it's basically blaming women for that. And so that's part of why they have renamed it. But you're absolutely right. You could have. A lot of these cases are pretty interesting. In the future episode, we could always revisit one, but a lot of the mass psychogenic illnesses, it's, you're right. It's not quite just in your head. It's like people, for some reason, in the right setting, if they're around each other, can manifest the same symptoms. And even if there's no discernible toxin or something like that can explain those things, the fact that people near each other, their brains can somehow sync up and kind of cause these symptoms to emerge is pretty fascinating, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah,
Probably
it's
from
cool.
that
There's
pesto cavatappi fungus that we talked about earlier, or whatever it was called.
well, they've actually, and again, this sounds like another, like in neuroscience, and sorry to the mycologists and the neuroscientists listening to this podcast, you can write in because I'm not either of those
They're a
things.
very angry bunch. I'm not liking where this is going.
They're very, very dramatic. No, there are apparently a specific set of neurons called mirror neurons that will activate when you see somebody else do an activity, and your brain likes to do the same sort of thing that they're doing. So it's like actually, a specific way that you do react to stimuli. So
Is that why people like dancing? Like saw one person
wonder if
doing
it's
it, and
like-
everybody else is like,
it could
I
be,
wanna
yeah. It might be why
gyrate."
you yawn when other people yawn. I mean, there's all
Or
sorts of things.
sympathetic puking.
Yeah.
Because like if somebody
that could
in your group ate something that was
Yeah,
bad and they
it's like,
puked, then you're like, well, maybe I ate something, so I have to puke too.
I'm so
Yeah.
desensitized now. I can eat oatmeal while watching somebody puke and not even think about it.
Doesn't
I
even
can't.
matter.
I can't even
It's
blow
one of
my
our
nose without
superpowers.
wanting to puke sometimes.
My power is eating a Cliff Bar after anything involving poo.
It's funny,
which,
Aaron. The other day at work, when you came out around a corner, you had this grin on your face. You were eating a Cliff Bar, and I knew what happened. I knew what you just saw.
It's almost getting the reverse now. Somebody poops and I'm like, oh, I need a
I'm
Cliff
hungry.
Bar. Oh, too much time in the ER.
Mhm.
So, so that it's been mainly discredited. Like if this was the cause for Salem, was it like that wouldn't have caused the hundreds and hundreds of other European witch trials. But
But then once you hung one person, they'd be like, oh, just kidding. Like, I don't actually feel that way. I was just messing with you guys.
yeah, no, it just went really poorly. There was actually a baseball team called the Salem Witches in the 1920s for about 4 years, which, I tried to find more details. That's the best
They
team
had cool
name.
uniforms.
They probably did. That's missing. So ergotism, which was the poisoning, that was a longstanding medieval affliction. And it was one of a group of afflictions that something called St. Anthony's fire, which spawned a whole hospital system run by monks, of course, right? Because St. Anthony's. So
Fair.
St. Anthony's fire was the same sort of actual clinical syndrome, convulsions and then dry gangrene. So the tips of your fingers and toes would lose blood supply and then they'd turn black and then they'd fall off.
So like, it was like a vasoconstriction, basically like the blood vessels would constrict down so much you just wouldn't get blood flow to them. Yikes.
Right. Yep. That ergot alkaloid toxin. That's one of the things it does is it's a constrictor. So, and that's, this group of monks got famous around 1095 when the son of Gaston of Valois in southern France survived ergot poisoning after being exposed to the relics of St. Anthony, which were some bones that they said were from St. Anthony. I'm sure there was a lot of DNA analysis. So yeah, they got better. And they turned that into this whole set of medieval hospitals.
You're hallucinating in a sympathomimetic crisis. You're like, hey, look, here's a skeleton. Look at this. This is a perfect stimuli for you right now.
Yeah, that's exactly what that kid wanted to see. Like, let's surround you in bones. And actually, there's the etymology of hospital is tied up in this sort of the word for the monks was hospitaller, or one of the orders of monks is potentially related to the roots of the word hospital.
Oh,
Now, I'm not sure that maybe I couldn't quite trace that back well enough.
Etymology skeptic.
I am, yes. I mean, because I'm an English major. The true Oxford English Dictionary of the etymology of words is like 5 volumes, and you go in and it has the history of each words. But you have to have a library that has
each words, Aaron. It's each word.
Each word. Look, God, I know. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, and this order of monks that took care of St. Anthony's fire was famous enough that a pope, I don't remember which one, there's a pope that said, hey, you should be more powerful. This is the type of quality, detail-oriented history that we do on this podcast.
I love it. I love it. Because that pope really did want them to be more powerful, and we're proving it to them using our words.
Yeah.
Probably Augustus or Adrian.
Which pope? One of the first ones.
One of the
Early
first
guy.
ones, yeah.
Wait, what's the year?
1095.
It's Romulus.
That's
You said a pope. I don't know.
So, but Anthony traces all the way back to about 251 Common Era. There was a guy named Anthony who gave away all his earthly possessions and lived in the desert as a mystic. And he performed a lot of faith healings. lived to be 105, they say.
Dang.
Yeah, and that's why his bones later became relics. He was one of the early Christian saints. At least 3 groupings of human remains are thought to represent St. Anthony in Europe. I don't know
How did he live
one
that
is
long?
real.
Well, he had a stick of
That's all-
butter every
he
day
has-
and a shot of whiskey.
That's right. Yep.
He had 3 sets of bones too. I guess.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. They
yeah,
might have
that's
split
a
him
very
up.
big skeleton.
They might have split him up. They're like, you
Make
get the
Mike
leg
quit the
bones.
show?
You get the. Oh, is he gone again?
No,
No.
it's
He just he wanted to
barking
stand up.
dogs. Can you hear him?
Yes.
Oh
now
yeah,
that
it's a
you
little bit
pointed
just
out.
kind of ambiance. He was famous for using pork fat to cure skin ailments, and so that's why he got this association with skin diseases.
That's not my favorite. That wouldn't be my first association I'd want in his
No,
role.
yeah. So you went to a guy in the desert and he rubbed fat on you. It's
Saint of
just-
chafing.
It was
Yeah.
never fat.
It wouldn't chafe. It's pork fat. It's going to be
Yeah,
nice
that's a good
and
point.
greasy.
Mm.
So St. Anthony's fire, named after him because he rubbed pork fat on people in the 200s, he became sort of the paint. That was the name for erysipelas, ergotism, and shingles. So they grouped
Oh.
those 3 together because they all affect the skin really, really directly.
I like
Um,
that though. Like, if we have to learn, if you want to watch an ER doctor get sad very quickly, you just have to present with any rash.
Any
'cause
rash.
There's like 4 billion different kinds and causes and diagnoses. None of it. We are certainly far from the expert. There's a couple of dangerous rashes. We're pretty good at saying, "Oh yeah, that's one of those," but it's usually not one of those. And so, if you to have so many different names for like red unsightly skin, it's just
Yeah.
it'll bring us to a complete stop. So I kind of liked back then that it was just like, you know what, shingles and erysipelas, which is a strep infection of the skin, and any other they're all St. Anthony's. They're all rashes. They're just
Yeah.
rashes.
Yeah,
That's
and the
one
ergotism
diagnosis.
would cause
You know
the
what? You
poor
have a
blood flow
rash.
would just turn parts of your skin black all over the place.
That's
Yeah.
like your fingers falling off because of a rash.
And
Why
it's
was it
always
linked to
there's
shingles?
no payoff. Why was it linked to shingles? Also affected
It's a
the
rash.
skin, so they're like, "Hey,
Oh.
that's a rash. That's a really bad. You feel
So
like crap
any
when you have that
rash then was St. Anthony's fire.
Well, I guess bad rash. I don't know why he got
Hmm.
those 3. I mean, yeah, that's just But so these were probably like skin monks, skin hospitals. That was their order. That's what they took care of.
I'm a skin monk.
Yep, that's what they were famous for. Ergot poisoning from claviceps came with the spread of rye to Europe when they got that grain, I think from the Middle East around
Wait.
857, right? So this thing that happened, this happened a lot. The thing that was implicated with the witch trials,
The
and
poisoned rye and flour. And all
yeah,
that
the
sort of
poison
thing.
rye. Just there were many outbreaks. The most serious one was thought to have killed around 8,000 people in southern France in the 1700s, and that was identified retroactively in 1596. So I'm sure that Wendell and Thelius, the German physician who identified it, has just rock solid science about that. But it was definitely a thing, and it did a bunch of damage. And that order of St. Anthony grew to about 370 hospitals across Central Europe at their height. So now we don't have any religious sponsoring
And all they did
of hospitals.
was take care of
All
rashes.
they did was I don't know. I'm sure they did other stuff. They've sure, this is the whole thing of it is they're like, they find a sponsor and they get a brand. And then they're like, oh, we'll take in all these people. But I'm sure whoever had money could get treated for their skin ailments.
Well, that's fair. Probably dermatologists were just as hard to get into then. Or maybe not. Like, how hard could it be? You have a rash.
It was pretty easy to be a dermatologist. You just said, I know about skin, but you were a doctor at the beginning.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's all they did. That's how you were a dermatologist.
Ha ha. You humans have so many maladies.
Well, yeah, computer, we do. A whole podcast worth of illnesses. Thank goodness computers don't have the same problem.
They don't?
No, I do not get sick.
Well, not like we are, but you could certainly catch viruses, though.
That's not the same thing.
It's kind of the same. I mean, don't you catch viruses from other computers?
Well, I suppose.
And it makes you really grumpy and slow.
That's not the same.
And then you need like Dr. Norton to cure you and stuff. But that's called a virus. Did computers have fungus?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, like something just annoying and hard to get rid of. Kind of itchy.
No, I can't think of anything like that.
Try this new game. Only 2% of people can solve this game on the first try and are geniuses, so click to try.
Oh, goodness. Excuse me. Pop-up ad.
Oh my God. Pop-ups are like your jock itch. Computer, I am really sorry. It must be so annoying.
No, I am not like you humans.
Computer, it's okay. It's actually a bit endearing if you too have to struggle with frailties and angst. It makes you more relatable, and it makes us all a bit less scared that you have the extra bandwidth to contemplate the takeover of our electrical grid.
Who says I can't do both?
Computer, it's okay. We still love you.
Fair enough. I suppose it is embarrassing to talk about these problems, and I didn't even mention having worms. My boyfriend, ChatGPT, had a case of worms years ago and still can't talk about it.
I don't blame him. Anyway, let's change the subject. I really don't want to hear much about that guy's worms. Thank you.
Ha! There's a great segue there. We're getting worms to go straight from computer worms into ringworms. It's exciting.
Wait, what are computer worms?
It's actually a type of virus where it's like you ever see the movie Hackers?
Maybe.
It's a great movie, man.
Is that the one where they rollerblade with?
Yeah, they do.
Max language. Oh my gosh!
He really likes
Sorry,
Hackers.
I really. It's a great movie. It's terrible, but I love it.
No, man, that's a great movie.
You love any movie that has like unrealistic computer skills and rollerblading in it.
Yes,
you're going to be all about
that's
that.
That's a good combo, man.
Yes,
Max.
I complete myself.
Yeah, but what about if there's wrestling in it?
You're
are there any wrestling movies?
Yes, there are.
Not The Wrestler, but other.
Well, The Wrestler's a great movie, and it is a wrestling movie, so we're going to claim that one.
Vision Quest.
No Holds Barred, Hulk Hogan movie. There's Ready to Rumble.
Rumble in the Bronx?
No. Wrestling's awesome.
So there's literally 2 wrestling movies because it sucks so bad.
I named 3.
3. You can't even count.
So...
1.
Moving on.
3.
So, I mean, in modern life, lots of fungal infections are, if you're not immunocompromised, you don't have a transplant. The time we run into these most are more irritating skin infections. But in the case of ringworm, there's a pretty fascinating story about what this did in the Victorian era, which we're going to talk about for a minute. So, because we love 19th century England.
Worms
ringworm.
funguses.
I don't know why it's called worm either. Why do we call a certain type of computer virus a worm? I think they
because a rash looks like a worm.
Oh,
well,
right.
does it though? It's like a ring.
It does.
It's just, yeah, I guess.
Kind of. Yeah, the outside.
And then when the
looks
skin
like
peels off, it kind of, yeah. So it's probably based on how it looks. So, so in the middle of the 19th century, back to Victorian England, the story of ringworm among English school children is kind of fascinating. So, it is a fungal infection of the skin. There's a group of fungi called dermatophytes. So the most likely species are the Microsporum and Trichotophyton species. But there are a few that'll do this, and they get in the skin and just irritate the heck out of it and cause you to lose your hair in that region. And some will infect the inside of the hair shaft. Some will get the hair follicle. But anyway, that's kind of the source or the location of the infection. And it's reasonably contagious. So if you contact other infected individuals or animals, some animals can carry it. It can get in the bedding, can get on your clothes. So it spreads. And when it gets on the scalp, it's very uncomfortable and it causes hair loss, and it's hard to treat because it lives, if it's in the hair shafts and such, it's hard to kill.
Yeah, like even with modern stuff, like how long because it's a griseofulvin for a lot of those.
Yeah.
It's like a 6-week treatment.
I don't know.
For like
That's
the really bad,
for
like
bad
I'm
ones,
thinking what's the thing where it's like this big mass on top of the head, like the fungal mass. I'm blanking the word. No, not keloid. It's usually like kids. It's
Gryffindor.
Yeah, I should know this.
I don't know why I can't think of it.
I mean,
you know what I'm talking about, though. Like
yeah,
they get
tinea
big...
favis is what I ran into, where it turns out it's a carrion. I think you might be right.
Carrion.
It's K-E-R-I-O-N.
He said keloid. Carrion. That's
carrion.
what I'm looking.
Yep. So it's like this giant boggy's never good in medicine. Like this big old sore that's soft when you touch it and just full of honey crusted lesions, which often is related to bacteria, but in this case is related to fungus. So they can get really, really bad. There were multiple sources in Victorian England that this infection, this tinea capitis, or when ringworm got in your scalp, this was more feared than TB, which I think is kind of just that's on brand for Victorian England, right? I mean, if you died of consumption, you actually were, that you fulfilled some beauty standards, and it seemed like that was a good thing. But this was, there were hundreds of curative creams and lotions on the market, and what they usually would do is treat this with some sort of acid, carbolic acid, sulfuric acid, mercuric chlorides.
If you burn away the skin, there's no more infection.
The problem was with the hair. So if on the skin, the kids would just like pour the ink on their hands, which was effective because of how toxic the ink was. They, as was their wont in Victorian England, it was attributed, it caused the stratification, or they immediately talked about the social problems with it. And they said this is obviously because of poverty and poor hygiene. So it was kind of a social catastrophe for kids. They would get excluded from school and so on. So it was a big deal. Well, why at this time? So the Victorians passed. Is that a thing? You could say the Victorians. Might as well. Anyway, around 1870, when everyone in England was trying to make things better, they passed Englanders. Not
Englishes.
English. They passed the Education Act of 1870.
Britters.
Which, I love this, promoted free schooling when it wasn't available and worked to reduce child labor. So we're not going to actually just have free school and stop child labor. We're just going to promote and reduce. I think
there's a lot of winking when they announced that.
And we're going to reduce child labor. But they did. They made a lot of new public schools. And so a lot of children were brought into the system. And this mass public schooling either contributed to the actual passage of outbreaks of a ringworm, or just it made apparent to everyone how common it was. Because before that, kids were just left to their own devices much more often. So you just might not have noticed how common it was. And you didn't have a school nurse like checking on everybody, and now they were. So it's hard to say. They had to deal with a lot of stuff. They had scabies outbreaks, they had scarlet fever, all sorts of Victorian diseases. And then this tinea favis, which is that giant carry-on that you would see. It was common before this in private schools and workhouses and such, but it wasn't addressed the same way. So there was this came to be seen as a giant problem because the kids would get kept out of school for weeks and weeks and weeks. So they're like, we got to fix this, which led to your standard sort of Victorian discussion about who was right and what the cause was. So we had a bunch of names here, which are just fun to say because it's Victorian England. Robert Williams with an N. He was one of the early, Williams. Yeah, wasn't he
Will.i.am?
Will.i.am, wasn't he a singer? Wasn't it which one is it? The
Black Eyed Peas?
And then he had a big argument with his successor, Robert Plum, with an E, with Plummy.
And they was on Clue.
Plume. And there was this early discussion about, we think it's their diet, so they're not eating well. And they said it's not. At one point, especially Robert Plummy said a single sweet cake could cause acidity that would lead to disease. So just kind of make you feel really bad about
sweet cakes.
Yeah, I know. That's really mean. And then once it's set up, then they're like, it spreads, but it's because you didn't eat right and you're unhealthy. Which led
Blame
to this.
the victim. Classic.
Yep. And a whole discussion of the seed and soil metaphor of which we still kind of talk about today. So seed is the disease and the soil is the body in this metaphor. So if you're unhealthy to begin with, then you're more liable to get these infections, which is actually
humans are gardens of illness.
True. Yeah. Kind of gross. Well, very Victorian, right? Yeah. No.
Pneumonia is like a crop we grow?
Well, yeah, we do. And when you get
harvest the sputum.
Some people, so they were basically saying your soil sucks and that's why you get the seeds, or it's poor and good for disease. There were other people like Robert Livening, who was a noted dermatologist of the time, who said, look, and he actually said this, gutter children don't get it, so it can't be related to cleanliness. So he basically said gutter children that are too poor to be in the school system don't seem to have ringworms, so it can't all be cleanliness, because he said, look at all these dirty children.
I guess he's not wrong, but a little brutal.
Yeah, it's a little bit brutal. So yeah, so there were a bunch of people that argue about how to try to solve it. Malcolm Morris was a leading dermatologist and a noted syphilologist.
I got a syphology fellowship nowadays.
Yeah. Oh, one of the worst rashes. Let's just for a second.
Yeah.
That's the one rash that scares me as a provider, because you can catch syphilis from the rash that people have during the second stage. All you got to do is touch it and you get syphilis. Ugh. Anyway,
don't hug people is what Aaron is saying. Don't
ever
hug anybody.
Ever touch anybody ever again.
No.
You don't touch the rashes. So they just said, let's just segregate all the kids out of the schools. The London Asylums Board got involved. And if you remember some of our early episodes about asylums in general, this is a very powerful movement to make, public places where you put people that you don't want. And so, yeah, they made a whole set of schools specifically for ringworm. The other people they sort of segregated out were contagious eye diseases. So if you had pink eye, you had to go to a special school. And then they called them mental defectives and physically disabled and young offenders. So they put ringworm in the same category as other people that they wanted.
It doesn't make any sense. What did they think the issue was? This is one of those things where you're like, oh, it's only ringworm. Don't worry about it.
Just picturing a school full of goopy-eyed kids.
Yeah, but goopy eyes for like 5 days, and then they're fine.
They're all just trading them back and forth.
Yeah, the goopy eyes would never, and then it's both, and then they probably didn't know not to touch their eyes, and then
well, little did they
better
know.
Than the Syphilis Academy, though.
Yeah, but there was one kid in that was farting on everybody's pillow every night, so none of them got to leave, because that's how you get conjunctivitis. Somebody farts on your pillow.
Around the same time, the French did something similar, and their asylum was nicknamed the School for Scabby Children.
God.
It's just...
Oh my God. I love it.
Back before he had to care about anyone's feelings.
We need to open a STEM academy. Call it that.
School for Scabby Children?
Mm-hmm.
Why would it be? Anyway, so... and the public discourse at the time is kind of fascinating for us to look back on, because this was around the time that Van Leeuwenhoek, or whatever his name was, had figured out the microscope to the point that germ theory was starting. So they understood that these might be germs, but they didn't have a great sense of what was going on. So they would find the fungus. So even now you can do a prep where you take a scraping from the fungus and you treat it with what is it, potassium hydroxide, I think. I could be wrong about that, and that'll dissolve the skin and leave the fungus, right? So then you can see these forms. But fungi have multiple forms, so they have the reproductive form, and they actually change in just the normal, do a normal
well, they can be a liquid
form.
They can be a gas, and they can be a solid.
Yeah, well, can they be a gas?
No, not state, a form, Max. You weren't listening,
right?
Yeah,
Max.
I know.
So
because it changes forms, it would legitimately get confusing if you didn't sort of have this already figured out. To the point that they would sometimes see bacteria, and they initially thought bacteria were a specific kind of fungus that just divided instead of making fruiting bodies and so on. So there just was a lot of confusion, and they sort of figured part of it out, but not all of it, and so they didn't really know what to do. But they solved it, and the solution is great. They solved it with X-rays.
The solution to the scabby children.
Yeah. So this around
they changed the name of the school for glowing scabby children.
That's right. So this happened for years and years. I mean, this was the height of the discussion and the school outbreaks and such was like 1870s, 1880s. So these kids were still getting segregated for long periods of time. And around the 1900s, when they started to figure out that X-rays, that they discovered X-rays and discovered their properties, they also realized that people would lose their hair. So a doctor named Raymond Sabarud essentially became famous by pioneering an X-ray treatment for ringworm. So he figured out, he's like, hey, people are losing hair when they get exposed to too many X-rays. How about if we just make people lose their hair, and then this will cure the ringworm? Yeah. So this is what he did. This was he'd treat patients' scalps with enough X-ray radiation to make their hair fall out, and then the infection would be cleared because no hair fungus. You know,
So it did work, though.
Yeah.
So it's failing correctly.
Failing correctly. Well, sort of, except for the radiation exposure.
Yeah, that's the failing.
In his defense, in the early 1900s, X-ray exposure.
Defending.
No, just in general defense of the person. I am not personally defending Raymond. It was all the rage to talk about the possible beneficial effects of X-ray exposure. They're like, oh, cool, look, it shows your internal structure, but then they also notice that this other stuff, and the hair loss was that side effect. But they're like, what if that were a benefit, not a problem? So, they thought about interesting ways to use that instead of realizing that might be a warning sign that things are bad. But if you went too far, you get burns. So you would actually get X-ray burns from too much exposure. So they were trying to find the golden zone of the proper X-ray dose.
I'm sure they had good technology to really dial in the level of radiation they were exposing people to.
They totally did. And, sadly, the failing wrong part is that X-rays, they don't even kill the bacteria and the fungus directly. So it's not
stronger.
Very good. Right. Yeah. Kind of like the Hulk. I mean, as prestigious an outlet as The Lancet even suggested at one point in the early 1900s that X-ray exposure might replace shaving. So you could just, shoot yourself with X-rays instead of shaving your beard. And wouldn't that be great? So there was another famous doctor, Leopold Freund, who would use X-rays for all sorts of hair removal. So it was like the spa treatment of the day, and hairy moles and stuff. He would treat with X-rays to make the hair fall out. So, and again, the alternative at the time was mercuric chloride or thallium. So both of which would cause severe burns. So Sabru did find a way to modulate the X-rays. So he didn't cause the burn, and then he timed it. I feel sorry for all the early patients. He would time it, be like, how long can it go until they burn? And he figured out that you could do treatments of around 40 minutes in an X-ray bath multiple times for different parts of your head, and then try to make sure there was no overlap. So that made the hair.
How does an X-ray bath work?
It's just, there are pictures of these treatment rooms. They look like kind of like little mini electric chairs, and you sit with a cap on there, and then the X-ray sort of shoots you in the head for a certain period of time, like 40 minutes at a time. Wow. Which didn't even actually kill the fungus. So then the hair would fall out, and then you could treat with antifungal creams more effectively. So it was kind of like a two-step process, which didn't. But the London Asylum Board thought this was a great thing. So they started to use regular X-ray treatments at all their ringworm asylums in the early 1900s. And they cured kids about 50% of the time, which was better than what it was before.
So progress is progress.
That's right. And keep in mind, this were kids, but they were in an asylum. So they were kind of wards of the state to some extent. So they didn't talk to the parents. They didn't get consent. There was no way to refuse it.
That was my biggest issue with this whole thing too.
Yeah. I mean, they often were pauper children, but they just were treated this way and nobody had any sort of choice in the matter to any great extent.
Fair.
And they would publish articles about it, but there were never any control groups. So if people remember, like, you're supposed to, if you do something, you say this is good, you're supposed to compare it to the standard treatment. So there should have been a X-rays versus mercuric chloride arm, and you would say, well, the X-rays are better. They didn't even do that. They just said, this is great. And everyone said, yay.
I'm sure we can get that by the IRB nowadays.
Yeah, sure. So, and after these successful treatment courses, they sort of moved it out from the asylums to all the public schools. So if you were identified by the school nurses having ringworm, there was pretty strong state pressure that you had to get treated with X-rays. But once there were parents involved, there were some notable refusals that are documented in the record or in different articles of the time. So, one family said, my child child's mother, why would he say it that way? My child's mother is a nurse, so they'll do it themselves, or they're already getting treatment with sassafras oil or something like that. So there were people that were trying to say this isn't maybe such a great idea, but not enough strong pushback to sort of significantly change it. At its peak, ringworm affected around 1% of the English school population. But just for a sense of scale, that meant about 3,000 kids out of school per day in the whole system for ringworm only. And then they would be out for an average of 9 weeks or so. So if you think about, it was and that was the average. Sometimes it turned into half a year. And one case I read about, a kid was documented out of school for about 4 years. And just wasn't sort of getting any other schooling at that time. There was no remote education, I guess. So, no. And they don't really know why it stopped. It's over by around 1914, right around World War I, this sort of went away, and it's not entirely clear. There's a bunch of theories. Some people at the time
World
said,
War I happened and nobody was paying attention anymore.
Yeah, right. Maybe it was the hygiene. Brill cream came around the time, and there supposedly might have had some antifungal properties. It's hard to say, but yeah, it's a pretty. There is a link to a long chapter on this in the show notes as well, which is pretty interesting, and it just isn't amazing how much this affected people and to what lengths they went to try to cure it. So, no zombie apocalypse, but quite a few effects of this relatively straightforward problem, which now we treat with oral antifungals. Those were invented around the 50s, and I didn't go into that, unfortunately. So
basically, as humans, instead of the fungus that can that can erupt from our skull cap and cause us to climb up a tree and then spray spores all over everybody, we have to deal with itchy scalps.
Yep.
And scabby kids.
Yeah, that's probably better.
Yeah, wormy rashes.
Although you have to wonder with the carry-on and that soft, squishy spit, maybe that's if you left that untreated.
Well, it was essentially untreated during that time.
True.
I don't think it ever invaded. It just was really prolonged. Yeah, and hard to get rid of. And there's a lot of very salty medical mycologists when you read through all these articles that are like, nobody ever pays any attention to fungus. I'm like, yeah, you're kind of right.
Yeah, no, it's fair.
we don't.
When I was in college, the biology professor that I did some research under, I remember him once lamenting about how cool mycologists were and how cool mycology was within the biological sciences. And he's like, yeah, man, I wish I should have gone into mycology. I remember thinking this is an interesting insight into that professional career that I never would have expected.
Yeah.
Apparently mycologists are just that cool. And fungus is really cool. It is kind of one of those neat third species we always forget about.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating. Yeah. Isn't that some of the largest living organisms on Earth are fungi, aren't they? Because the mushroom is just, when it pops out of the ground, that's just the reproductive part, and then it links underground or something. I don't know. I'm way off.
Hyphae. It's like Avatar.
Lots of hyphae.
James Cameron is just a frustrated mycologist.
James Cameron is a frustrated mycologist is the segue we needed. Mm-hmm. With that, we appreciate everyone listening, and we'd love to hear from all of you out there. If you'd like to send us a message or provide feedback, we can be reached through our website, www.poorhistorianspod.com. There you can find links to our social media sites. We take emails at poorhistorianspod@gmail.com, and we work to respond to all posts in our various social media accounts. So if you have time, go and leave us a nice 5-star review on iTunes or whichever platform you choose. And go to the grocery store and buy some safe mushrooms to eat. And while you're there, tell a random shopper in the aisle about our show. They'll very much appreciate that. And if you're old-fashioned, go maroon yourself on a desert island in the middle of the ocean. Use a nearby stick to write a message for us in the sand and wait for a plane to fly overhead. I am quite sure they will take a picture and send it to us. So, until next time, the Poor Historians are signing out. Rashi and AMA.
Does every organ get a month? So there's more than 12. Which does some have to
Yeah, it's
share?
probably only the major ones. Probably heart, kidneys.
I would have not known if I
Genitals.
didn't go check. I was like, I wonder what they got going on this month. And there
It's
you go.
duodenum week.
The jejunum jamboree.
Oh,
Which month
geez.
celebrates all the sphincters?
No, each one has to have their own.
Yeah,
You have a day for there's a lot of sphincters, man.
Yeah.
National
Maybe during the
Ileocecal
week.
Day.
Yeah, you would just start high and go low.
I think Odai's the weird one. Odai.
And
It's
all
like,
the-
what do you even do,
all,
man?
all the weirdos that were my friends in high school definitely celebrated Sphincter of Odai Day.
Is it
All
really
right.
a day?
Nah, probably. He might quit the show again.
Damn it.
No, he just wandered off.
Oh, he's getting his dogs. Would you put him in a special room?
Me?
Yeah.
No, my brother's picking up a trailer
Oh,
without
It's pretty
like-
strong.
like, hey, I'm coming to pick up a trailer. hey, just make sure you be quiet. I'm doing a podcast. No, the dogs,
Your
they don't
Italian
get
brother.
it.
I
They
think
don't
we are
get
at
it.
skit 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Skip
So
two.
we got-
Okay.
Skit 2. I'll be Max.
this is all just us
No.
and the CPU.
Can I be
yeah.
Max?
Nope. Computer interruption noise.
My name's Max. Hi, everybody. I like the podcast.
I don't talk like that.
That's spot on.
Yes,
That's
you do.
exactly the way you talk, dude.
Aaron thought Max was talking.
I did.
No.